Ready, go. Okay. Good afternoon. Hello, Michael. Hello, Hilda. Michael, we've met online. Hilda, you've attended some sessions with. Yes, indeed. Good to see you again. We've got one full-time faculty member, Joseph Klein from the English and Rhetoric Department, joining us online. Hi, Joseph. And I think we'll have one other person joining us a little bit, but so it's going to be a small intimate gathering today. My name is Jessica Yoon. I am the Director for Curriculum and Assessment here at Triton, and we are gathered together today to watch Monday Morning Mentors webinar on valuable feedback assessment. What's the name of this? Forgive me. The actual title, How Can I Use Assessment Data to Provide Meaningful Feedback and Deeper Learning? We will, if you're not familiar with how these sessions work, we will watch the webinar together. It's just 20 minutes long, and then we will have some time for discussion, some questions, reflection about what you guys are doing in your courses and how that relates to what we're learning today. So with that said, Lo Tuan, we will get started, and away we go.
Hello, I'm Dr. Nicole Barta, and I welcome you to this Magna Mentor video on how to use assessment data to provide meaningful feedback and enhance learning. In this session, we will begin by discussing the goals of meaningful feedback. That is, what are we trying to accomplish through feedback? Next, we'll address the common challenges we may encounter when delivering meaningful feedback. We'll also discuss key principles and practical strategies for implementing feedback. And to conclude, we'll discuss how using assessment data can play a role in the decision-making process and enhance the feedback we provide. Now, let's start with a reflection. And I'd like you to ask yourself, how many times have I graded an assignment, left comments, and then wondered if my students actually took the time to read them? In reflecting on my teaching practices, I've often found myself in this situation, assigning grades and making numerous comments on each assignment, yet not sure if students use them constructively. This approach, I now realize, is more about relaying information, not providing feedback. Feedback is about growth. It's about identifying the gap between current performance and the desired standard. Then we must guide students on how to bridge that gap to enhance their future performance. Meaningful feedback goes beyond assigning a grade or making comments on an assignment. It is a dynamic process involving a cycle of reflection, adjustment, and iteration, fostering knowledge development and improved self-regulation skills. Our main goal should be to use feedback as a teaching tool to enhance student learning and performance rather than justifying grades. Using this approach not only empowers students to refine their performance and learning strategies effectively, but also fosters the development of lifelong learning skills. Now that we've explored the goal of meaningful feedback, let's address some of the challenges in delivering it, such as managing time constraints, creating a structured approach for using data, and actively engaging students in the feedback process. Time constraints pose a significant barrier to meaningful feedback. The breadth of topics to cover in a course can consume the schedule, leaving little room for refining knowledge and skills. To overcome this, we must adopt a learning-centered mindset, one that emphasizes depth over breadth and prioritizes the quality of learning experiences. Another challenge lies in implementing a well-structured assessment system, which is vital to delivering meaningful feedback. A comprehensive assessment system not only facilitates the delivery of the feedback, but also ensures consistency and reliability in evaluating student performance, thereby reinforcing the relevance and impact of the feedback provided. A systematized approach helps educators and students to identify, understand, and address learning gaps, fostering a structured pathway toward progressive development and mastery of skills. Yet many of us lack a system for examining data and teaching students to analyze data to determine what is working and to identify growth areas. Intentionally integrating opportunities for reviewing data or comments into the schedule ensures that feedback becomes an integral part of teaching and learning. A substantial challenge we face is getting students involved in the feedback process. Students may tend to focus on their grades and quickly move on to the next assignment, frequently overlooking our comments or neglecting to investigate the reasons behind their mistakes. Despite our investment of time and energy into providing thoughtful feedback, it can be unclear whether it leads to any change in learning if we have not devised a method for students to demonstrate that they are using the feedback. This highlights a real struggle, ensuring that students not only read and reflect upon our feedback, but also understand how to refine and enhance their learning processes. It's about communicating in a way that helps students see the value in understanding their mistakes and learning from them. We must take the time to teach them what feedback from various sources looks like and how to use it effectively to inform and adjust their ongoing learning efforts. This involves showing how to interpret and apply feedback to their next tasks and use lessons learned for future applications. Overcoming feedback challenges requires focusing not only on what we communicate, but also on why, how, and when we deliver our messages. Now, let's discuss some foundational principles that can guide how we create strategies to use assessment data for delivering meaningful feedback. First, the why, which signifies the purpose of feedback. The primary aim is to enhance students' understanding and foster their development, all while emphasizing the importance of learning from mistakes. Moving on to the how, this pertains to offering opportunities for applying feedback. Students need opportunities to reflect on, evaluate, and revise their work based upon feedback. By intentionally incorporating feedback sessions and data examination into the course schedule and our daily teaching, we establish the expectation of using feedback as a tool for improvement. The win is about timeliness. Delaying feedback can result in students continuing to misunderstand concepts, leading to further errors in subsequent tasks. Providing feedback at key moments ensures students have sufficient time to adjust their work and address misconceptions. Finally, the what, referring to the content of our feedback. It needs to be targeted and actionable. This implies that feedback should be clear, concise, and directly aligned with learning outcomes. It should offer specific guidance for improvement and eliminate ambiguity about what needs to be changed to meet expectations. With the key principles outlined, let's examine strategies for embedding them into our instruction to enhance student learning and performance. Given that the primary purpose of feedback is to foster growth and learning, it's essential to integrate formative assessments. Formative assessments, often regarded as assessment for learning, serve as ongoing check-ins or mini evaluations during the instructional process. Unlike summative assessments, which evaluate what students know or have learned at the end of an instructional unit. Formative assessments are dynamic and occur during the learning experience, which enables timely adjustments to teaching strategies and offers students an opportunity to enhance their understanding and skills through continuous feedback. They give us insights into a student's knowledge and skill levels, which enables us to identify gaps or any misconceptions in comprehension before a summative assessment. To effectively implement all the feedback principles previously discussed, I recommend developing a structured formative assessment system. This strategy involves determining what you want students to know and be able to do by the summative assessment and planning backward. Considering the comprehensive nature of summative assessments, it is evident that they often require the integration of numerous skills. This demands a holistic understanding from students, synthesizing various learned skills and knowledge into a final product or performance. So by conducting a task analysis, you can identify the requisite knowledge and skills students must acquire for success. This process ensures that every essential skill and knowledge area is mapped out and addressed throughout the instructional period. Once you've identified those requisites, formulate a plan for tracking their progress toward mastery. This strategic approach ensures that the learning pathway is clearly defined, offering both instructors and students an approach toward achieving desired learning outcomes. This involves determining key checkpoints where targeted feedback can make a significant difference in the outcomes of the summative assessment. Strategically placed, these checkpoints serve as critical junctures to refine learning approaches and redirect efforts as needed, ensuring that the path to mastery remains focused and efficient. Now, let's see how this plays out in practice by examining two distinct summative assessments: a final exam that incorporates a mix of question formats and a comprehensive multi-page essay. These different assessment types call for tailored approaches to feedback and formative assessments, ensuring students are well prepared for the challenges that each present. In courses that predominantly focus on knowledge recall and using exams for summative assessments, it is important to reflect on how frequently students practice recalling information. Consider, do I have data indicating students' comprehension levels before the final assessment? And have I identified concepts students find challenging before the final exam? If such data is lacking, it is unlikely that students are receiving meaningful feedback. This underscores the need for opportunities to assess their understanding before summative exams. For these courses, a practical formative assessment strategy is to use mini quizzes across several weeks to check for understanding, a method known as retrieval practice. Retrieval practice is an evidence-based learning strategy that involves recalling information from memory, thereby strengthening neural pathways and enhancing long-term learning. It's not merely a measurement of one's memory, but a powerful tool to solidify learning and identify gaps in knowledge. Now, suppose you were teaching 5 major concepts over 4 weeks with a unit exam covering all of the concepts at the end. Implementing weekly mini quizzes on each concept can offer insights into students' current level of understanding. If students are struggling with concept 1, it could influence their ability to understand concept 2. Analyzing this data can guide whether a concept needs reteaching and help students determine if additional study is needed outside of class. So now reflect on this scenario. If 75% of my class has a limited understanding of concept 1, is it in the student's best interest to move on to concept 2? Consider the impact of advancing to new material if most students struggle with introductory concepts. Additionally, I strongly encourage instructors to incorporate quiz item analysis, considering both instructor and student perspectives, as this strategy addresses the challenge of involving students in the feedback process. From the instructor perspective, implementing quiz item analysis can reveal insightful patterns in student responses. For example, if a significant number of students select the same incorrect answer, it might indicate a common misconception or highlight a need for further clarification in instruction. On the other hand, if incorrect answers are evenly distributed across the various incorrect options, it might suggest that students are guessing and may lack foundational knowledge in the area. From the student perspective, encourage students to reflect on their responses. Was the correct answer chosen because of a solid comprehension of the content, or was it simply a lucky guess? It's critical to emphasize that a correct answer from guessing does not demonstrate understanding. If the answer was incorrect, determine the cause. Was it due to carelessness, such as rushing through, or a lack of content knowledge, or maybe misunderstanding the question? Engaging in quiz item analysis can guide students toward appropriate resources for exam preparation, ensuring true understanding rather than a mere illusion of it. Now, let's move on to courses that emphasize application, synthesis, and the creation of products, and use summative assessments like comprehensive written essays. It's important to reflect on how many opportunities students have to revise and resubmit their work. Ask yourself, are students given sufficient time and feedback to address misconceptions and enhance their work? And have I identified areas where students might require additional support before the final submission? Ensuring our students produce their best work isn't simply about focusing on the final submission. It's closely linked to our consistent effort to provide ongoing, impactful feedback throughout their learning process. Therefore, incorporating chances for improvement and identifying areas that need additional support is essential in helping them produce their highest quality of work. In these types of courses, a practical formative assessment strategy may involve designing interconnected assignments that progressively build upon each other. This approach allows students to apply feedback from previous tasks to improve future performance. For example, if an assignment targets specific criteria like credible sources, citing evidence, mechanics, and content development, create assignments for each of these areas that enable practice and feedback before submitting the final product. For example, to determine if students are using credible and relevant sources for a topic, you might assign a research article assignment. This assignment could ask them to find sources they will cite in their final paper and then have them justify why this source is credible and relevant. You can devote time in class for students to discuss this assignment with a peer and guide students through ways to identify if the source they have selected will be an appropriate source to cite in their final paper. In this manner, students avoid reaching the final product only to have a well-constructed paper that fails to meet the requirements for credible sources. They have received meaningful feedback prior to the summative assessment that helps them know if they are on the right track for using credible sources. Similarly, to determine if students are using appropriate source integration to cite evidence, you could design an in-class writing activity that has all students reading the same article and then ask them to paraphrase a section of information using an appropriate in-text citation for that article. After 5 to 10 minutes, direct them to pair up with a partner and compare their paraphrase statement and in-text citation. Once they have discussed, then you can show the correct in-text citation along with several ways of paraphrasing the information. And students can inquire whether their responses adhere to paraphrasing guidelines or potentially border on plagiarism. Finally, a key technique for providing the what of feedback, making it both targeted and actionable, is to equip students with a rubric or checklist that outlines the criteria for the final product. Take, for instance, a writing assignment rubric. It might include criteria like organization, source integration, and clarity of content. With these established criteria, instructors can give feedback that targets these elements, guiding students toward enhancing those specific areas of their writing. Creating ratings such as meets expectations, approaching expectations, and does not meet expectations for each criterion can help students pinpoint which part of their work needs attention, enabling them to act on the feedback to improve their performance. A key advantage here is that educators might not even need to provide extensive written comments. Instead, by utilizing these performance indicators, students can be encouraged to self-assess and determine what adjustments are necessary to reach the next level, such as meet expectations. Moreover, instructors can analyze rubric evaluation reports to identify common areas of struggle. If, say, 60% of the class didn't meet expectations in source integration, an instructor might conduct a reteaching session or share additional resources to support students in meeting those expectations in future assignments. By analyzing the data on student performance against specific criteria, instructors can adjust the course schedule to address collective challenges or offer personalized support through office hours and additional resources for individual needs. Decisions can be made strategically, considering the performance of the class as a whole, as well as attending to the needs of individual learners. Furthermore, encouraging students to use rubrics or checklists to self-assess their preliminary drafts can be quite beneficial. This can become an integral part of an assignment, where students not only submit their self-evaluation, but also identify a specific criterion they'd like the instructor to examine. Employing this approach helps refine the feedback process, focusing only on feedback related to the student-selected criterion. Additionally, it can provide tangible evidence of students using the feedback to refine their final submissions, allowing for a clear assessment of whether the feedback on the selected criterion has been effectively incorporated. Not only does this approach conserve time, but it also fosters a sense of ownership among students, encouraging active engagement with feedback and facilitating continuous improvement over time. It can be very eye-opening to see how the data from assessments can guide so many decisions in both teaching and learning. So first, let's discuss teaching decisions. That is, how we as instructors can use assessment data. One of the fundamental decisions it can help us with is adjusting the pacing of content. If we notice students are picking up concepts quickly, we might decide to progress at a faster pace. Conversely, if some topics are more challenging, we can slow down and incorporate more practice time or reteach concepts. Additionally, when we identify gaps in understanding, it enables us to provide extra materials, coordinate supplementary sessions, or suggest online resources, all specifically tailored to our students' diverse learning needs. Identifying consistent errors or misunderstandings in an assignment may show a need to clarify instructions and eliminate any confusion. Having discussed the utility of assessment data for instructors, let's shift to the student perspective, which is equally valuable. Identifying areas that need more attention helps students allocate their time and effort effectively. Also, evaluating their current learning strategies is key. If a student's approach isn't yielding the desired results, it might be time to change their study tactics. However, students may not realize the potential of assessment data in making those types of decisions. Therefore, it is instructors' responsibility to take the time to show students how they can become more proficient learners by using feedback. In drawing our discussion to a close, the main takeaway from this presentation is that incorporating assessment data into decision-making can significantly enhance the teaching and learning process. I hope this presentation has helped you reflect on how you can use assessment data to deliver meaningful feedback to your students. Keep in mind that the strategies shared today, such as formative assessments, scheduled feedback sessions, and the use of rubrics, are all adaptable to your unique teaching style, different types of courses, and the needs of your students. Adopting these practices can help engage students in the feedback process, ultimately enhancing their learning and performance. You can find practical examples of how to design a series of interconnected assignments in the supplemental materials for this session. I appreciate the time you dedicated to joining this discussion, and I wish you the best in making feedback meaningful to your students. Thank you.
All right. I am going to turn the camera around and come closer to you guys. First, initial thoughts. What I love about today's group, even though we're small, is that each of you are like from a very distinct discipline. We've got math, we've got health sciences, we've got computer sciences, and then English and rhetoric joining us online. I love that. Initial thoughts. Obviously, I have some guided questions, but anything?
I can confirm that the rubric idea works.
Yeah.
Because I taught 7 sections last semester, which was ridiculous. And I fell way behind my grading because I like to get feedback.
Yeah.
And that takes way too much time.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do for this semester is I actually wrote a rubric for the different things that I look for, and actually assigned point values to them, put them in a matrix, and then adjusted all my point values so that they're all multiples of the points in my rubric.
Yep.
So that it matches up.
Yep.
And this semester is going really, really well because I give the rubric to the students,
Yes.
and then in my feedback I'm able to just tell them how many points in each category,
Yep.
and then they can refer to the rubric to find out why would I've lost those points. And
Yeah.
it saves a ton of time.
Yeah. Do they have the rubric ahead of time?
I gave it to them on the very first day,
That's
and
awesome.
then I reminded them of it when I gave them the first assignment.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Have you gotten any feedback from your students about the use of the rubric yet?
Not yet.
Yeah,
I
that's
just
great.
started doing it
Yeah.
last week. So.
Okay, that's good. That's right. For some reason, I thought you said last semester. That's awesome, though. Any other initial thoughts?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I have a question.
Please.
Do you teach the same class, same format for all your classes?
I teach the same kinds of classes. So I teach programming. So I mean, there's different programming languages, but they're all really similar structures.
So your rubric is the same for everything that you do?
I'm using it for 2 different classes right now, but they're both programming classes, so it fits both of them.
I was just curious because, I mean, I find for my classes, I do have to tweak my rubric depending on what I'm asking for, because I can't just give it, every assignment is the same thing.
Right.
So I have to tweak here and there.
Yeah.
I had to do that this past week for one of the assignments, but what I did was I just updated the instructions for the assignment to say that this category of the rubric doesn't apply, or something like that.
Okay.
John, you're going to add something?
What I was going to say is that, as Michael stated, a rubric, I actually do a rubric for my class, for my math class, where they have to do a project. It's a very detailed rubric, and right, I do assign a point system to do that. But we also, for the rubric, they also give a library presentation because they also have to do research or collect articles to apply to their project. So for this semester, both of my math education classes, they have to read a book, and they have to find 2 articles to support whatever they're thinking or whatever they're going to be teaching from that chapter, and they just have to have articles to support it. So within the rubrics, I do have where I assess this one now that the articles and which articles that they're going to be using, and then also what other outside materials that they're using as well too within it. So for me, yeah, rubric is very detailed. I mean, one of the things that listening to this, what I'm gonna do is add 2 additional sessions within the course to talk about or do an in-class assignment to help them understand how to use the articles within their project, and then also looking and then talking about what I will expect from them because of that. Because usually for my class, for the math class, it's not a lot of writing, but however, I do incorporate writing in it. But for that, because I show them that I'm not an English teacher, no offense to any English teachers, but I'm not an English teacher, so therefore I want the finished product. But I'm also, like I said, I'm incorporating based on what she was saying. I'm going to incorporate 2 sessions to talk about how to look at the articles and what articles they should be looking for to support their thinking or concepts within their project that they're going to be submitting at the end of the semester.
Okay, awesome. What about you, Joseph, online? Do you use rubrics in your courses?
I do, yeah. For each essay that I assign, for Rhetoric 101, 102, we all do 5 essays. And so for each essay, there's a unique rubric, and then I assess it, or I give 2 forms of feedback. I use the rubric feedback, and then I also write lots of comments on the paper, or do like a big end note depending on what they have going on in the paper. But this presentation made me think about how I could have a more cumulative type of reflection essay, maybe at the end of the semester, so that the students would be looking back at my feedback and reflecting on their progress in the course or something like that.
Yeah. So you're kind of thinking in the reverse, because you do some formative assessments throughout, but you don't have anything at the end that kind of synthesizes all that feedback. So you're thinking of adding something at the end to do that as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the students do turn in rough drafts, and then I provide feedback. So every time they write a final draft, they are using feedback.
Yeah.
But then I provide more, feedback on the final draft, which also like kind of justifies the grade. But I don't, like, just as she was saying, I don't always know if they read that last feedback on each essay. I don't know how much they use it, because we actually cover a lot of genres of writing. So I'm not sure if they say, well, I need to read the narrative essay feedback to write my research paper, right? So I think it'd be nice to have something at the end that ties it all together, like a portfolio or just a sort of a big reflection essay on the semester.
Yeah. So how many of you are already using, I mean, it sounds like some of you are wanting to add some formative assessments. How many of you already have these like check-ins or touch points throughout the semester, like she was suggesting? Do any of you use that already? Yeah. Talk to me about your experiences with that.
Well, the experience, I'm like Joseph, I'm just afraid that they don't read the feedback for it. And it bothers me because the fact that it's like minor things that, like mechanics or grammatical errors that they've made, but then I'll see it again. Yeah. And I'm thinking they didn't read it. And the reason why I'm saying that is because for my classes, especially my math education class, they have to do a chapter summary. And the chapter summary for me, like I told them, is to give me a better idea on understanding what they've learned, rather than just giving a quiz or an exam with questions and they just give me back the correct answers. I want to know what they've learned and how they can apply it in their field. Because in the summary question, for example, for chapter 2 for my class, they answer a question, but they also have to apply it to the grade level that they'll be teaching. So they have to give me more I agree with this problem, I can use slope, but how are you going to teach it in the grade 2 or grade 3? That's what I'm looking for. But you're right. I mean, I look at them and then I give comments, and I'm like Joseph, I don't think they read them. Yeah. And when I started doing this, most of my colleagues think I'm weird because it's math class. But it's because of the fact that when I first started, and way before this is like 4 years now, I just wanted a different way of engaging them into the class instead of me just lecturing with them and then application in the class. I wanted more, but I also wanted them to think, what can they take from the class using as a portfolio at the end and saying, this is what I really learned. Yeah. And when they go to the 4-year institution, for math educators, especially the ones who are taking it for elementary mathematics, they can use that and saying, yes, I learned this math, because now the 4-year institutions are saying, in order for us to grant you your license, we need to know what you've learned, or the state wants to know what you've learned before they can give that to you. So I'm saying this is when I started doing it and learning a little bit more. They can use it as a portfolio and say, yeah, this is how I progressed from learning mathematics from pre-K up to 8th grade in the class.
Awesome. What do you guys see as like pros and cons of formative assessments? I mean, I think we've heard some pros, but if you haven't adopted or haven't been using formative assessments so far, what are some of the reasons why it just hasn't been something that you've tried to incorporate?
Grading.
Yeah.
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 And the turnaround for it, because I'm speaking for myself. I told my students I try to do it within a week, and I have to admit, I just finished grading today their discussion questions. That was their introduction. My class had to do an introduction discussion question, and in that introduction question, they had to tell me a little bit about themselves and what grade they'll be taking or ideal grade that they'll be teaching. And I just finished grading them today. So it's the grading part, and and I wanted each person to get some type of personal feedback from me. So that takes that 22 people. That was a lot.
Yeah, and then you spend all this time writing the feedback, composing the feedback, thinking about their work, giving something constructive, and then you don't even know if they're reading it and using it, right? Yeah, that's a big thing. Other pros and cons that you can, or specifically cons that you've encountered so far? That's probably a primary one. Time.
You know, the other thing, well, because I do, for the final, I do give them a final paper. And in Blackboard, we have the opportunity to give them, they start off, they could send it to me, I give them feedback, and they could correct it and resubmit it.
They never do.
They do. And some of them wait till the last minute, and they'll say, "Oh, it said I work better under pressure." No, you don't. I go, no, you don't. It's a research paper. You don't find all your information overnight. I go, no, you don't do this. So that's the problem.
Yeah, for sure. Michael, did you have any other thoughts about that? Or just kind of echoing what everyone was saying?
I'm pretty much just agreeing with
Yeah, for sure. You know, so, go please.
I wrote it down. Another con, I think, in this case is actually getting your students in the mindset of reading those responses. And it also said, I wrote down, there's also the mindset of looking at the responses, but also understanding the responses, and also for me as an instructor to analyze and go back and analyze all the data from that.
Yeah, I think those things are pretty common, right? I think that's the thing that the webinar kind of highlighted is like, this is definitely one of the things I think many instructors encounter with that kind of, it's like this feedback unloop, the broken loop of feedback. So you know, she broke it down into two ways that, you know, our courses might be structured with summative assignments, a final exam, or like a final paper, right? Like recalling knowledge or synthesis of ideas or that kind of thing. And in the there's two supplemental materials that are connected with the webinar. I printed out one, the supplemental materials. If you didn't get, I don't think Tuan, you grabbed it, but I think there's some back there. But another one was specifically in the note-taking guide. I can send you guys a link to that too. But she had some examples for each of these types of summative assessments, because her point too was, what is your summative assessment? Okay, then let's work backwards from there, right? So if the problem is students not looking at the feedback, and then you not taking all this time to do the feedback and then analyzing and then all of this out of class work, integrating it into the course to the extent that you can to focus on it in the course. So if you're doing a knowledge-based summative assignment, final exam, for example, some brief quizzes, she says, along the way, and these don't have to be extensive. These are 1 or 2 question check-ins, right? Doesn't even have to be graded. You know, it could be something that you give at the start of class and you talk about it briefly, right? It's not even something that you have to take home and grade. And this isn't necessarily something that you need to provide feedback on, but it's immediate feedback. They take the quiz, You talk about the answers in class, you get a sense of how well they're doing or not doing, right? And then you can take a look at that data to say, okay, these concepts we do need to spend more time on. Maybe I need to adjust my lessons plan a little bit to spend a little bit more time on this. I know that's really, really hard because you got a lot to get through.
Well, I was going to say, I did write that. That's why I was like, I wanted to add that's why I wrote when she said that, to add 2 sessions in regards to that. And then, because I learned last semester when we went over to the library and they did the presentation about how to do the research for the articles and et cetera. And then I, as a math instructor, I just want to finish the product. So listening to her, I'm going to add those 2 sessions in there. So talking about let's do a Google search in the classroom of teaching decimals and summarizing in 5 or 6 sentences what the article was saying, so that they understand when they put their project together, because of the fact that they're reading a book, and the name of the book that they're reading is Alex's Adventures in Numberland. And it's all about the main character going through this world of numbers and how to use it in the classroom. And each chapter deals with a different topic. But nevertheless, they are reading that, and I'm thinking, after she said that, that's why when you said that, I'm like, I did write that down. That we're going to do that in class. And I think another challenge with it that we do these things is the time within the class session. Because I only have an hour and 15 minutes to get through the learning outcomes that are set for the course, but then also the objective what I've set for that day.
Yeah, it's hard making those adjustments, especially on the fly. Like, you've done your whole class for this semester. Maybe you've taught this class for years and years and years, and you've got a group going, and sometimes it's hard to make those adjustments for sure. I just wanted to point out, so these are this was a suggestion for these big final exam type summative assessments. Tuesday, Thursday, quick quizzes of 2 questions each on consecutive concepts, and then you kind of build on those to cover a little bit more. So each week, your questions get a little bit longer, but it's reviewing the past concepts and kind of bringing them all together, especially if these concepts like building block type concepts. You can't really get to concept 2 unless you've gotten concept 1. And so that by the time they get to the final exam, let's say it's 20 questions, it's covering all of the concepts that you presented, but you presented these concepts in a building block type of way, so that each time you've had an opportunity with these formative assessments to kind of check in to see where they are, not for only your sake, but for their sake as well, right? So maybe you don't have an opportunity to synthesize or make shifts along the way. That's okay, but now you're providing an opportunity for your students, right, to synthesize information better, and move through this knowledge a little bit more with a little bit more confidence. So by the time they do get to that exam, this isn't even an final exam, it might be a unit exam, right? So by the time they get to that exam, they've had an opportunity for, what did she call it? Retrieval practice. That's what she called it, retrieval practice. So giving that in-class opportunity for practice will help them learn these concepts better. And this might be something, again, like I said, maybe it's not something you can do on the fly, but after you've looked at your semester and you think what went well, what didn't go well, or you're doing your year-long assessment process, this could be something that you could implement for the next time you teach the course, even if it's not something you can do on the fly. The other one was for our a paper at the end, a comprehensive paper at the end. She gives these examples of in-class writing assignments. She gave a great example of citing evidence, giving the students an article that they need to read, a brief article, have them paraphrase and cite, get together with a partner, see how they did, share that information. Maybe this takes maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most in the class, and I get it, maybe you don't have the time, but this is, especially if it's a course that is about writing, maybe Joseph, you can speak to this a little bit. If you maybe you do this already in your courses, but specifically I'm curious to hear if this might be useful at all to you, Joseph. But I like this example of it's not something you have to do outside of class. It's something that you implement within class, so you're not creating work for yourself or for them. Joseph, do you have any thoughts about doing something like this? Do you do something like this already?
Are you asking about having them reflect on it, or are you asking about like practicing it as a formative assessment in class?
Practicing it as a formative assessment in class.
Yeah.
Do you do this already? Yeah. Would it be useful to you?
Yeah, definitely. So I do this a lot. Like one example that I have coming up tomorrow is I'm starting to teach MLA for the first time. And, you know, several other papers use MLA. They need to cite sources. So I first, you know, teach the ideas behind and then the format for like an in-text citation. And then they get into pairs and they start with some that I like, just some sources that I give them that they need to make in-text citations of. And I kind of make it a game, so they try to do it as accurately and quickly as possible as a group, and then like we sort of see which team wins, you know. And then so that gives me a sense of kind of how the class is doing as a whole. And then my second step of that is then I will have already had each individual student bring 2 sources from their own research project, and then they will do the same thing, but now they'll do it individually about their own sources, and they just write them out, you know, on a piece of paper. I have them given to me at the end of class, and then between that and the next class, I'll go through and just give comments and for them, but then I also kind of write down how everyone's doing, because some people come in and they're like, yeah, I can totally do this, I'm fine, and other people need a lot of assistance. So
how do you find these formative assessments contribute to learning and overall success in your courses?
I mean, it's incredibly important because, like, especially something like how to make a in-text citation, I need to scaffold it. So like the first step, because I use it throughout the course, I use it for 3 essays in a row. So the first step is like just the basic MLA format. The second step is incorporating credibility information for the author. So that's a little bit trickier in terms of wording, and then it just kind of goes from there. So if I'm noticing that they're not really catching on to the basic format piece, then I need to spend some more time on that before I move on to the next like kind of higher level. And a good thing is for each of my essays, I have like a day built in where it's a proofreading day for them, where the rough draft is due, but then I can kind of like tailor what I do that day for where I see them needing help. So I will often be like, okay, this class really needs help with MLA, so I'll use that day to try to catch them up.
Joseph, if I may, do you also do the same techniques if you're teaching or going over APA format as well too?
You know what? I don't teach APA in rhetoric class because it's just part of our learning outcomes that we do MLA. But if I taught APA, I absolutely would. Yes.
Joseph, do you find the grades of your students are pretty high as a result of these kinds of touch points that you do throughout the semester?
Yeah, they are. It definitely helps. It definitely helps a lot with the success rates.
Yes. Yeah, I believe that. We started our discussion talking about how you or don't use rubrics in your courses. So I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I lost my train of thought. So those of you who use rubrics in your courses, how do you use the rubric in the course? Like, is it something that did you know that there's a rubric tool in Blackboard Ultra? And is that what you use? Those of you who do use it, do you like it? Do you not like it? Why or why not?
I actually haven't used it yet,
okay.
but now that I'm relying more on rubrics, I want to.
Yeah.
I haven't yet.
Yeah. How about you, Hilda?
Well, I used to use it on the old Blackboard.
Which was a little bit more features to it, but yeah.
I haven't used it on the new one, but I did use it on the old, and I did like it because it was there. I mean, it took a little bit constructing it, but it was there to use. And the students had it right there, so it would pop up when they were writing their paper.
Yeah.
So
Did you?
supposedly now it's easier. I haven't really gone into it because I'm not teaching a classroom class.
Yeah, okay. Joanna, you don't use the rubrics.
I've seen it online. I've seen it with, so I should say, I've seen it in Blackboard. However, because of the class that I'm teaching and the material that I would like to have in there, I've added some additional items within my own rubric. And besides, one of them is that, and this fact is actually going to the library. That's one part of the rubrics that they have to go to the library. So in that, they have to get a signature, and you can't really do that in Blackboard.
Yeah.
So they have to get a physical signature because it's part of their project. Yes, the rubric gives them a detailed outline of what I'm looking for and what they're expected to turn in. But when they go in to do their research, the articles in this case, one of the steps is to go to the library. They have to get someone to sign up on to say they did go to the library. Yeah. Triton Library. Right. I have to make sure that was emphasized in there. Right. That someone signed in and said, yeah, they came here, they did some research. It's just in the way that, for me, to tell them that the library does have these resources, because you tell them in the classroom, and most of the time, Google, I'm not saying it's bad, but that's the first place they'll go, but they don't realize that their own institution has a library where they can get some of the information as well. Sure.
So you said that you don't necessarily use the rubrics because you feel like you can't customize it enough? Am I understanding that?
Well, because it's yes and no. I can't customize it where they have to get a signature. You can't do that in Blackboard.
Yeah, but the rubric that you can do in Blackboard is whether or not they've done it. You know, I see what you're saying. You still need to do it. But the rubric itself, you can grade whatever that they've done, whether or not they've done it.
With their project, it's attached to their project. So when they submit the project, the rubric comes back to me.
Got it.
So they have something that they can check off and say, yes, I did this and did this. So for mine, there's a student side, and then there's the instructor side. Sure. So the student side is where they can check off and say, yes, I did this, this, and this. And then on my side, the point system, where I assign the points to associate where I graded them for.
Do they get to see the instructor side data?
Yeah, I send it back to them.
Yeah. How about you, Joseph? Do you use the rubric tool in Blackboard, or you use something external?
I do. I use it. I love it. It's just so much easier to edit and to use. I sometimes wonder how I found the time to use paper rubrics before. but the one thing I've been thinking lately is that I spend a lot of time reminding students where it is and to look at it before they turn in essays, but it's a little hidden away because they have to click on the thing they would use to submit an essay, but before they want to do that. So I've started wondering about just printing it out from Blackboard and handing it out in class, because I think that would probably get more eyes on it, which would be probably helpful for the students.
I've played a little bit with that tool too, and I think it can certainly serve these needs, but I'm curious if Triton had a more advanced rubric tool that you could get cool disaggregated data about your various criteria, and you could share reports. You could even share your rubric with other faculty. Would you be interested in that? Would you use it? Pros, cons, thoughts?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Me being in the math department may not be taken very well because it's writing.
Sure.
Most of my colleagues
don't use.
They don't do writing assignments.
Well, that's okay. It's not mine. No, you're the only one. But that's okay. That's all right. But you could share with anyone on campus too. It doesn't just have to be your own colleagues. How about you, Hilda? Thoughts?
No, I would. Yeah. Because it's always helpful to know what someone else is doing, and it might help you to develop something better.
Yeah.
Because that's actually how I learned how to do my rubric when I was taking one of these meetings. I came to one of these, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and so I developed something else into it.
Cool. How about you, Michael?
I think it would be helpful for a lot of things.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of students over the years tell me that they appreciate the feedback and structure that I give them.
Yeah.
And they say that other programming instructors haven't typically done that.
Sure.
But if I had a rubric I could share,
Yeah.
then it would give them a chance to kind of structure it in a more consistent way.
For
So
sure.
I like that idea.
This is, I don't want to say selfishly, but this is really great feedback because as we're talking about just institutional assessment and specifically general education assessment, and we already use rubrics, but how can we disseminate that information to our instructors in a useful way, and how can they if they need to apply that rubric and to have something that's a little bit more dynamic and extensive. I think that's great to hear that you guys would use it. Would you, let's say, if you were asked to assess one of your assessments, a test or an assignment, according to this rubric, according to someone else's rubric, would you say, I'll step back, and you don't already assess with a rubric, and you grade it in some other way, would you want to use the grade that comes out of that rubric, or would you just prefer to utilize your own grading system?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. So I realize that probably wasn't very clear. So if another instructor or someone else had shared with you a rubric to use, or maybe your chair had said, we'd like you to assess this your test or writing according to this rubric, in addition to or instead of your current rubric that you use, or if you don't use a rubric already. How would you feel about that, first of all? And second of all, would you, and if you had a choice to use the grade that comes out of that rubric or not, what would you opt for? Did I just make that more confusing?
Like grade my class?
The assessment.
Or grade something I wrote. That's what I'm.
Grade your, so let's say you have a paper in your course.
Okay.
And you have your own rubric that you use and to provide a grade for that paper. If your chair came to you and said, can you also use this other rubric because we want some departmental data about this, would you opt to grade it according to that rubric or your own rubric?
Well, understanding all of it, I would do both. For me, because it gives me an understanding where I need to make some improvements.
Yeah.
And because not everyone sees the same thing.
Yeah.
When you create a rubrics in this case. So, for example, this semester they're doing a project, what is called an equity project. Mm-hmm. Well, last semester they did a research paper, so I'm not always doing the same thing. So the rubric is always changing. Sure. So therefore, it could be the same concepts within the departmental rubrics that I have to make sure it repeats. Yeah. But then my own concepts of what I'm looking for as well too. So that's why I said I would use both. Yeah. In this case. But if you had the grade that comes out of it, I think I would weigh both of them to see if there is a difference in there of what individuals say that they should have and what my criteria is, what my expectation of my students. Mm-hmm. So I think, seeing both of them. Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. Thank you very much. We're about to wrap up, but thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. So for me, I would do both. I would see both of them, use both of them, and make modifications of that. Because again, for my department, if we're saying as the learning outcomes in this case, and saying they have to have the quantitative understanding, I didn't include that, but I also included something else. Yeah, right. So I would use both grades just to see, but I would also notify to my students that the grade that they're receiving in the course would be the one that is the rubrics that was graded for them.
Yeah. Great. And certainly having the option is important. Mm-hmm. Well, we're about to wrap up. Any final closing thoughts? Are you going to go and put some formative assessments in? It sounds like, Tuan, you are.
I'm always modifying. I mean, I do it because I tell, like I tell my students, I'm always, every semester is a learning experience. Yeah. So you don't have the same thing. Yeah. And for me, I'm always changing that because of the fact that the students that you're dealing with, these new things or new concepts that you come out with. And you grow.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of changing. And then, yes, I've noticed the one in Blackboard, but I just got used to just making my own,
Sure.
making changes
Right.
to it based on the whatever we're going to be doing that semester. And if I will be doing it, because my Math 102 has to do a project, and my colleague just spoke to me last week about that, and she asked me, "Do you create your own?" I sure do.
Yeah.
But I created based on the students
Yes.
that I talked to.
Yes.
So even though the outcomes are still the same,
Yeah.
the project is always changing.
Sure. Well, and I mean, I can tell you that the Blackboard one, you can change it every semester, every course. You can share it with you can share the one that currently exists, you can share with your own courses. You can like copy, you can always change it if that helps. Any other final parting thoughts, questions?
Afraid most people won't look at it.
Well, and by maybe doing if you can, some of these in-class opportunities that kind of forces them.
Oh, I'm not talking about the students.
Oh. Awesome. Well, we'll wrap up here. Make sure you complete the evaluation form for today's session. If you haven't grabbed the supplemental materials I printed out, there's some on the back. But both of these can be found online in the CTE. There should be links to the supplemental materials you can print out, copy. Because I shared the note-taking guide, but I didn't print that out. But you can grab that from one of the links as well if that's useful for you. Great. Thank you so much for joining today. Have a great rest of your day. See you guys around.